Yeah, Wild is probably the thing I walked away from that being most excited about. I'm going to be honest, I completely forgot that was the thing that got shown at Gamescom.
Well, I think everybody did because that was last year's Gamescom.
That was Gamescom 2014,
Yep.
and it was like Gamescom isn't a big announcing type of show. They don't. You do a lot of
that year. I was at that, like physically at that conference, and I remember it being pretty big. That was the PT conference, and I think Wild closed it out. And yeah,
that was when the Tomb Raider stuff happened with Microsoft. Like that Gamescom in particular actually was a big show.
Yeah. So this was Michel Ancel's sort of from that opening trailer.
I'm a dumb boy around this. For some reason I was studying this and I'm like, I got GDC and Gamescom mixed up there.
Oh, that's fine.
Because it's like 3 PM and my brain has started leaking through my ears.
Oh no!
That doesn't sound healthy.
Luckily, we wrote words on the sheet of paper. Michel Ancel.
Yeah, he started. That's the creator of Rayman and Beyond Good and Evil.
Beyond.
Good and Evil. And he is, in theory, still at Ubisoft, but has formed a side studio called Wild Sheep Studio, and their debut game is going to be Wild.
And it's really interesting because I think a lot of people hear, oh, Michel Ancel is a new side project game. That's cute. And they expect to be like a 2D platformer or something. And then it's this like incredible open world caveman animal game. And it's really interesting. Like Ubisoft is a cool company in that I wrote a thing a few years ago, actually, in that they tend to give people a pretty long rope as far as like Patrick Plord got to stay within the company. He directed Far Cry 3, Assassin's Creed 2, but then he made Child of Light, which is the kind of game that traditionally you would leave a AAA dev to go make on your own, but they let him make it within Ubisoft. And now he runs a division called Funhouse. It's for a lot of cool side projects like this.
Yeah, that's part of the cool hip Ubisoft we've been seeing the last few years, where they're just like, we're really into weird artsy stuff.
And that's why it's weird.
Fun platformers.
Patrice Désilets, who created Assassin's Creed, left because he felt kind of restricted, and he is also making a caveman game outside of Ubisoft. It's this really interesting thing where
Ubisoft is also making a caveman game
because they're making
inside
Primal.
of Ubisoft.
Yeah, so they announced Far Cry Primal, and it's like if I'm at Ubisoft and I'm like, this dude Michel Ancel announced a game called Beyond Good and Evil 2 like 5 years ago now that we've never seen anything from other than that cinematic, and he's making a game that feels like it would directly compete with Far Cry Primal. It's really interesting. It's really interesting they allow that to happen, and it's not even a Ubisoft title, despite him being a Ubisoft employee.
Yeah.
Very strange.
The
circumstances there are really interesting.
But the footage we saw, I thought mechanically was really interesting in terms of it seems like the main mechanic is sort of you're this like old shaman in back in the old days with snake witches and everything. And you can possess the animals in the environment. And it's sort of like Space Station Silicon Valley / Geist, where you're jumping around as a ghost.
Before we have to print an error in next week's Beyond, I want to point out that none of that actually could ever happen in real life in history.
I mean, no one lived. We weren't living in olden times.
It's pretty safe to assume you couldn't summon a snake woman.
I think that everybody was suffering from a pretty low-grade lead poisoning and malnutrition. So, giant naked snake ladies were a pretty common occurrence.
True. Naked snake.
I do
That's
like
my favorite of the snakes.
I like
Metal Gear.
I like they said you could put any animal on that thing. Like you could put a big bear monster.
Yeah, and so we saw in that demo, he took possession of an eagle who was flying in the sky, and then he sort of looked down and saw a snake that he got in his mouth.
Yep.
You got to ride a bear at one point.
He became a bunny.
He became a bunny
rabbit.
That's really
sort of
cool.
stealthily running around a group of cannibals.
It reminded me of Dishonored a little bit, where you do like the rat possession.
See, yeah, that's the thing is, man, that was a cool feature in Dishonored amidst other stuff where you're like stabbing and shooting people and jumping around. Like, I really like animals in games.
Same.
Because I'm a human being every day, you know? Like, it's kind of cool to get to be different animals, and I've been wanting a game where you play as animals for a while now.
Yeah. And it also seems cool if all of these objectives are like mini sandboxes where it's like, hey, this group of cannibals are about to eat this person. So use any one of these 10 animals to figure out what to do. So you became like a flock of ravens.
Yeah, I mean, we all glowed about how much we loved Metal Gear Solid 5 on the show, and I think a bunch of us said the one thing that we really would have liked was more to like kind of animal mounts and summons that you could bring a bear in and have him kill a bunch of people.
You ride a bear.
And now you can.
That's
and
what
you can ride them in
about,
water too, which is great.
Yeah, and there's big fish and stuff. I mean, I loved Shadow Mordor because you ride a dog.
Yeah.
You just train a dog and make it ride up the side of a building. That's pretty
and
exciting.
everybody's like, dog over there.
And then you're like, oh no, it's butt bags or something.
And then you get to the top of
the dog snatcher.
You go up three steps, and they'd be like, oh, that's really high up there. I can't climb it. Give me that animation.
Shoot a magic bow and arrow at some bees, and they explode. And they're like, whoa, crikey. And then more dogs come in.
I haven't announced this yet. I'm going to replace Nolan North in the sequel of that game because he did every voice in that game.
Wow.
Except for the Troy Baker voice.
Congrats,
Okay.
man.
You're a weird boy.
Yeah,
I really like that.
Scottish dogs.
I really like how the game sort of has not a cartoony look to it. It's not like
Yeah.
photorealism.
It's not fully- yeah.
It's
We were
not like
talking about this.
Horizon.
I'm immediately more interested. Like I'm not really on board with the whole caveman thing. I think that Horizon looks crazy cool, but it also has this kind of like it's still trying to be badass.
Oh yeah, and it is futuristic.
Yeah, and Far Cry Primal is still sort of like, this is realistic, gritty caveman
It's actually
stuff.
they're technically as far apart as you could be because the caveman thing, like Horizon, the idea is that the Earth has like been reclaimed. So it's like all of our technology is like their past basically, and so these weird like techno robot things are actually like super old to them.
Yeah.
And they're basically rebooting humanity. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it was interesting that like they also showed a Horizon demo at the conference, which we're not going to talk about too much, just because that was actually the thing Andrew and I saw behind closed doors at E3, and we
right.
talked
That you
about it on
wrote
the
about
show.
it. Yeah.
But yeah, I really like. I don't know. I'm a lot of this reminded me a little bit of. Do you remember Mark of the Kree for PS2?
Yeah.
So it reminded me of that a little bit, where it sort of felt like this could be like a Disney animated thing, like a more mature Disney animated thing.
Well, it feels like Fable. Like
yeah,
Fable has
totally.
that kind of like there's going to be mature themes in here, but it's also, I guess it's kind of French. You know, it's sort of like this mix of cartoony stuff, but with some adult theme thrown in there. It's very whimsical. And
I'm just super curious to see what this game looks like if it ever actually comes. Like, I mean, like they say 2016, but like I'm really curious to see like what the timing on this is and what it means for Michel Ancel. Like if this does really well, like does that studio become a bigger thing for him? I don't know. It's really interesting landscape wise, but yeah, the game itself looks awesome.
How have they been developing that in a spin-off indie studio? Like, where did that money come from?
Yeah, exactly.
Do they have a publisher? Like, what,
I mean,
what is that?
I imagine a guy like Michel Ancel can get venture capital pretty easily.
Probably.
And and it seems like
It's a
if been on
PS4 exclusive,
Yeah,
so-
so it's I'm sure Sony's been giving it money.
It's also like it doesn't seem like the most technically advanced game ever made. I mean, when you pull the camera out a little bit and there's the eagle holding the snake and you get a good view of that landscape mountain underneath you, like it's not jaw dropping. I think the scope of the game comes in the interaction with the fauna and, characters and stuff like that.
And he said on stage that this is not like they were not predetermined sort of cinematic moments. That this is a system and mechanics driven game, which I feel like you can do on a smaller budget.
Dude, if it's Scribblenauts meets Far Cry, I'm on board.
yeah,
What a
seriously.
good description.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. Like the caveman era works really well for it too. Like that setting, because like it does make sense that they would be kind of more in touch with nature than like we are.
So if go back and if you don't remember, watch the Gamescom 2014 reveal trailer because there's a lot more fantastical elements. There was this like they were swimming underwater and there was this giant like almost like seated skeleton king god under the water. There were like mudmen. You had this real cool puppy who was crawling on your head.
Mudmen is real bad boys.
Yeah, it seemed like it was a 4-player co-op game in that original
I
reveal.
wonder how different it is. Yeah, I wonder if that's still stuff that's in it or if this is just kind of.
It's been almost a year. And a
It
half.
feels like we saw like a very hyper-focused section of the game today. I'm hoping it's that rather than they cut out all the stuff we saw the first.
Well, and
episode.
that one was very much more of a trailer, whereas this is just a demo of like a slice of the game. So
which
I
is
don't know.
cool.
I'm super like that's one of those. Pretty much everything in this conference is a game where I'm very interested to see what it becomes. I think there's a lot of stuff here. There wasn't any clear like gigantic like that was like the biggest wow moment of the whole show because I think it was a lot of like. I mean, we'll get to all those in a second. Like a lot of these kind of
Kanye.
unproven games. A lot of Kanye. All these Kanye games. Really an Avicii game.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I've been doing this long enough that I'm good at kind of recognizing like here's a game that looks cool right now.
Yeah.
And here's a game that
That will
hopefully
actually be
continues
cool.
looking this cool because I think it looks really, really cool. This is definitely the kind of game. Like when I first saw the Witcher 3 demoed, like I went home and bought the first Witcher book and immediately started replaying Witcher 2 that I never really got into because it didn't quite grab me.
Yep.
And it was just this has that kind of vibe to it. Luckily, I don't have to read anything. I'm just going to play it when it comes out.
Yeah, I think there's less of those big sort of conference wow moments nowadays. Now that we're a few years into this generation and people are sort of settling into what these consoles are capable of, and basically getting to see here's 10 minutes of what a game looks like when you're actually playing it, which is kind of disappointing when you see games that are pre-rendered trailers because you're like everybody else is kind of showing off how this thing works, you know?
Yeah.
That's why I liked Wild. They were like, here's 5 minutes in this game. Here's what it looks like on average. Enjoy.